Lindsay, and today is a super exciting video for you guys. You may have seen some sneak peeks floating around the internet. You may have gotten a couple emails from DaySpring. There is a new illustrating Bible on the block, so I want to share that with you. But let's take a little trip down memory lane and look at some of the other illustrating Bibles that DaySpring has released, just so you can see some of the differences before I introduce the new ones to you. So if you're not familiar with the illustrating Bible, this was created by DaySpring. The first edition was this one here. It is rose gold, and they partnered with Illustrated Faith to do this edition. This particular one, the rose gold one it has like more scripty font throughout it. This is no longer in print. This was the first one that they did, and you can't get it anymore. It might be in some like deep dark corners of the internet. You might be able to find it, but DaySpring does no longer carry this. It's not in print anymore, but this was the first one they did. And this is so exciting. Changed the game for journaling Bibles. If you are new to my channel, take a look around. One of the things that I love to do is to worship through art within my Bible. And so you can do this in a traditional regular Bible. They did then come out with some journaling Bibles that had like a 2-inch margin that you could create in. But this Bible came on the market and just turned everything upside down because it had these giant margins, thicker paper that was created specifically for those of us who are journaling and creating and painting and writing within our Bible. And so they kind of took, some ideas and put together this amazing Bible. One thing that's really unique about it is coil bound. This is the first one on the market that did a coil binding, which is awesome. It allows you to kind of flip your pages over, and so you can work on one page. This is Big Mama. She's pretty hefty. You could flip it around so that just your one page that you're working on is flat on your table surface, so that if you are stamping, that way you're not stamping on your entire Bible. And it was just really nice to have that. You can see this is the first one that I was journaling in, and it is chunky, and there's still room in here to journal, but I used foam adhesive and fabric and all kinds of things. And because it is that coil bound, it allowed for expansion of the Bible, which is really nice. So again, this one is no longer available, but they did have some other options, and these are still available. From what I can see, these three were still available. So next, they came out with this version. So this one was not done in collaboration with Illustrated Faith. This was put out just by DaySpring. They made a few changes. I do have reviews for both of those on my channel. I'll link them down below for you guys if you're curious. This one still is available in the shop. And so it was this green cover. They changed some of the fonts to be a little bit more streamlined. So it was like sans serif font for the book titles and things like that. It is CSB translation. I do know that many of you had a very strong opinion about the green color of this Bible. I love it. It's a very deep kind of peacock feathers, emerald green with this really pretty pink on the inside. Some people didn't love it. That's okay. We've got 2 new colors coming for you guys, so stay tuned. I'll show you the new ones. But so there were just a few changes to this one. If you're curious what all is in this one, I have a full review. I will link it down below for you guys so you can check that out because it is still available over at DaySpring. And then in addition to those, they started breaking out into individual little books. And so they started with this one here. It's the Book of Luke. Same format, same size, same fonts. These were done in the NIV translation. So the rose gold and the green one were CSB. These are in NIV translation. So there's a little bit of a translation difference. The font, I believe, was a little bit bigger in these individual books. They're only 8-point font in the green and rose gold ones. This one I think was 11-point font, if I remember right, 10-point font or something like that. So it is a little bit bigger. So they came out with Luke, that is the blue one here, and then Psalms and Proverbs is this really pretty coral covered one. Colored one. I do believe they have plans to come out with more individual books. I don't work for DaySpring. I'm an affiliate for DaySpring. So just heads up, they did send all of these to me for review. And so they do send those, but they don't pay me to say anything specific. In this video, I will share positives and negatives of the new ones and compare them to the older versions and things like that. So just heads up. But I don't have any insight into what they are going to be coming out with in the future and when those are going to be. They did say that they will be releasing some more individual books, which is great. If you're wanting to do a specific book study, I know a lot of people used the book of Luke to do an Advent study around Christmas time. It was great for that. So you could kind of create in here with your kiddos. I did not do that, so I will probably do that this Christmas. I'll save this for that. But everything else about it was the same. The margin widths are the same and that kind of thing. The paper is the same. So it allowed you to just have a little bit smaller of one to work in. And then I don't know about you, but Psalms and Proverbs are kind of one of my most frequently journaled areas of my Bible. And I go through Psalms and Proverbs pretty quickly. So I love that they pulled out and did these in an individual book. That way I could just pick one of these up and replace this over and over again instead of having to buy a whole new Bible when my Psalms and Proverbs is filled up. And so I do have a couple entries in here. Usually what I do is I work in my main Bible, and if I come to an entry that I've already done before with that verse, then I pop on over here and do a Psalm and Proverbs in here. So I'm not doing anything specifically different in here. It just kind of gives me an extension of my main Bible. So both of these are in the NIV translation. So now let's talk about the new one. So there's going to be 2 new illustrating Bibles over at DaySpring. There's this one here that is the gray cover, and then they also have a very pale pink cover. I believe that Bethany from Southern Couture received that one for review, so I will link her channel down below so you can go check that out. You'll be able to see the color, and she always does really great in-depth reviews of the Bibles as well. I just adore Bethany. She and I have worked back and forth together behind the scenes on some things, and we talk back and forth, and so definitely go check out her video and see her full review. Sometimes she notices things I don't notice, or she uses things in a different way, and so definitely go give her some love. But here is the new illustrating Bible. Now, there are some differences, but not many differences. It's very similar to the green CSB translation one. So we're going to talk about the differences, my likes, dislikes, that kind of thing. There will be a corresponding blog post, so you can go check that out. I'll have close-up pictures and measurements and things like that. One of the most noticeable differences right off the bat is going to be the box that it comes in. So the pricing is exactly the same. This new gray one and the pink one are available for pre-sale today, August 14th at $99. It'll be available from August 14th to August 30th for pre-sale. If you order during the pre-sale from DaySpring directly, you will also get a bag of free journaling supplies valued at $75, which is amazing. They've carried a lot of illustrated faith products and things like that. I have not seen the goodie bag, so I don't know what it is in there. It's probably going to be different for everybody. If you order 2 Bibles, you get 2 goodie bags. If you order 5 Bibles, you get 5 goodie bags, is what the website said. So very good incentive to go ahead and order from DaySpring, though I do believe they will have it carried in some other places as well. But if you're going to get in on the pre-sale, I would go check out DaySpring. I will have my affiliate link down below. And so you can order from August 14th to August 30th and get one of those freebie bags. It goes up for sale on August 31st. That's when they'll start shipping. And then at that point, you will no longer be able to get the free goodie bag in addition to your order. So just heads up on that. But one thing I noticed is a difference, and I have some ideas for why this is. I'll talk about it as we go along. The older illustrating Bibles came in this nice keepsake box. And it's a box that's made to expand. So as you had tabs and things like that on your Bible, you could take these out and then have this box to keep the Bible in. These new ones, the gray and the pink one, come in a little bit smaller of a box. I lost the lid. I think I threw it away. The bottom of the box is made the same way as that other keepsake box is, but it's a little bit smaller. You can see there's no expansion pieces. And then it was just a clear plastic lid that slid down in here. So it is a little bit different of a box. I think that was a cost-saving decision because there are more pages in this Bible, and I'll explain why. But I think they just had to cut some things down. I don't know that for a fact, but I imagine that was one of the things that they did to keep the pricing the same. And so it is a nice box bottom. And with that clear top, you definitely could store it in this if you wanted to. Okay, so some of the basics about these new ones. Translation is different. So this gray cover and the light pink cover are in the NIV translation. That's the New International Version, NIV. Before you guys come at me in the comments, because I know there are some of you who are going to, they put out several quizzes and questionnaires over the years, DaySpring has, asking for your guys' advice, some of the things that you would like to see in the Bibles as they create new ones and that kind of thing. And so in response to that, I imagine the NIV translation was chosen because it was the popular choice, popular vote. I know there are some die-hard King James fans out there. I get that. There are a lot of journaling Bibles out there in King James translation, but these are not in the King James translation. Part of that might also be due to copyright. You know, you've got to work around all that kind of thing, and all the licensing and that stuff. And so I'm sure that plays into it as well. I myself read from a variety of translation. You know, some of those were CSB. This is NIV. I've read from ESV, King James. I read them all. And I'll try to link a resource down below that kind of talks about the different translations. I have a lot of opinions about translations, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. NIV is one of the first translations that I became a Christian off of, and I learned from and studied from, and it is a good, solid translation. Keep in mind that these Bibles are designed for Bible journaling. This is Big Mama Bible. This thing is huge. It is 9¼ inches wide. Well, a little bit more than that when you count the coil. The base of it's 9¼ inches by 9¼ inches. This is not the Bible that I'm schlepping to church with me on Sunday. Some of you guys do. You're amazing. You probably have some pretty awesome looking biceps. I don't do that. This is the Bible that stays at home for me. I read and study from other Bibles. This is the Bible that I do all my art worship in. So if the translation bothers you, you can definitely have a separate Bible, maybe even a more inexpensive Bible that you read and study from and then create in this one. That's just kind of how I do my work around with translations. And I really would encourage you guys to read from a variety of translations. I think that's really important as you're doing your studying and that kind of thing. Okay, so it is a faux leather cover, and it's like a faux suede on the inside. Mine is this kind of neutral gray. I wouldn't say it's necessarily warm or cool. Sometimes it kind of comes across as a cool steel gray, and then sometimes it's more of a warm gray, but I would say it's more neutral. The foil imprinting is a like gold imprint, whereas some of the past ones were more of a copper or rose gold. This is a true gold. The coil is a metallic kind of antiqued gold, so not too different from the other ones, but it is a slightly different color from the other ones. Font size. Font size is 8-point font. I know many of you are asking for a larger font. Guys, if you have not touched this Bible is hefty and huge. If it was to go into one of those large font prints, this thing would be so massive that you couldn't lift it up and you couldn't take it anywhere. So imagine that's why they stick to the 8-point font. If you're looking for a larger print, there are a variety of journaling Bibles out there that do have a larger print. It is a sans serif print, so it's pretty comfortable for me to read. It doesn't bother me too much. But like I said, I'm not sitting and reading from this Bible. This is a Bible that I just come to create in. Okay. Inside cover here in mine is going to be this like taupey color. You can check out Bethany's video to see the color differences between the two, but it's this taupe color, and then it's pulling from the first verse in Genesis. It says, "In the beginning God created," in this kind of gray font, and then the back is this taupey faux suede. "The grace of the Lord Jesus be with God's people. Amen." I love that. It is like a brushed suede, so if you're somebody who likes to keep track of your devotionals with the little kit sticker on the inside of your Bible, I don't know that the kit stickers will stick to this. If you've done that, let me know in the comments down below. I don't put stickers on the inside cover, so I'm not sure, but I would just imagine with the fuzziness, it wouldn't stick to that. So there is that. Sizing is the same as the other ones. You've got a 4-inch, I think it's just a smidge smaller than 4 inches, but actually, when I measured this one, I want to say it's pretty true to 4 inches wide. And then in the books like Isaiah, Psalms, and Proverbs, you get up to almost 6 inches, even more so in some areas of the margin. So you have a ton of space. There will be measurements and up-close photos over on my blog if you want to see that in more detail. Okay, one of the differences that I've seen between the two. So translation's different. This is NIV translation. The font is the same, but they did enlarge the chapter numbers. So the chapter numbers are a little bit bigger in this one here. Let me pull the green one out and we'll kind of compare and contrast here. Okay, so I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it on camera, but here is the chapter 1 for Genesis, and here's the chapter 15 for Acts. You can see that the font size is different. So it is a larger chapter, which I really appreciate. It's a little bit easier to scan through and find your verse. one thing I am so glad that they did, and what was a complaint of mine for this one here, in the CSB translation ones, the way that they did the versing was all of the verse numbers were on this left-hand column. So you'll see this passage has verse 24 and 25 in this top line. Well, unless you have every verse memorized in the Bible, you wouldn't know where 24 ends and 25 starts. And so that just kind of irritated me. I'd have to look it up and figure out where verse 25 was. They fixed that. In this one here, it's got verse 4 starts right here in the middle of the line of text there. So it is indicated right there next to the verse, which I so appreciate. I'm glad that they did that. One thing that I wish that they had changed, and I think many of you agree with me on this, I don't know why that they do this, it must just have to do with the printing, or I don't know what, is putting the titles here. So you've got all this space. It is smaller than the rose gold. The rose gold was a big, scripty, pretty font that took up a big chunk of the margin. So they did scale it down into the sans serif font, but they still have got it in this vertical orientation. I wish that they would flip it, put it towards the top. That way, when you're creating in the margin, you don't have to mess with covering this up or working around it. I just wish that they would turn it and put it towards the top. I don't know why they do that, but they do. So you just got to work around the titles is what it is. You do have, some footnotes and things like that in the bottom. It's not a study Bible, but it does appear like there's more like footnote type things in the NIV translation than there is in the CSB translation. That is something that I did notice. So 8-point font, bigger chapter numbers, verse numbers are right next to where the verse starts. Really appreciate that. Kind of a bum deal, I will admit, in the back here. So because it's a different translation, 1. 2, they made these numbers bigger, and then there's some additional print at the bottom. This Bible is about 50 pages bigger than the green one. And that's just because the translation's a little bit different. Again, because of those chapter numbers, that kind of thing, it made it 50 pages bigger. So I'm sure because of cost, they cut out some pages. Again, they made some adjustments to the box. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just trying to guess why they made those changes. But one of the things they did was they took out those 2 blank white pages in the back. And I'm so bummed about that. So don't worry. I did swatches for you guys, so you don't have to mess up your Bible. But you'll see here in the rose gold one and in the green one, there was these 2 blank pages. And one thing I always tell you guys when you're creating, test products in the back. So many of you ask, does this product bleed? Does that product bleed? And I say, test it in the back. Because even if it doesn't bleed for me, it might bleed for you in the way that you're using it, depending on if you're more heavy-handed, certain colors that you're using, that kind of thing. So I always say, test in the back. So I was going to use these swatches. I went ahead and updated my swatches. Those will be all over on my blog post. But you can see here in the back, it just ends in Revelation, and then there's no blank page. So I went ahead and did swatches for you guys. Again, these will be all over on my blog post for you guys. I did not test things that I know wouldn't bleed. Acrylic paint doesn't bleed. You can put acrylic paint in regular Bibles, doesn't bleed. Gelatos, I've tried these in everything. These don't bleed, so I didn't put them in here. But I tried a variety of things. I did not try everything because I don't use everything. So these are some of the things that you will see on my channel. If you're curious about a particular product, then definitely try it out on your own. Maybe find somebody else that's using that product and use it, ask them about it. But I just don't have the funds to go and buy every art medium out there. But some of the ones I see frequently that are issues or questions about, like Tombow dual brush pens. I probably every couple days in the Facebook group see somebody asking, do Tombow brush pens bleed? 50% of the people say yes. 50% of people say no. They bleed. I'm going to tell you here right now. If you use them dry, they don't seem to bleed. But the second you add water, they do bleed. So what I did on here, now just keep in mind, these pages in these illustrating Bibles, these are 75% thicker than traditional Bible paper. So they are thicker, so they can stand up to more than a traditional journaling Bible and even way more than a traditional Bible. But I like to stamp and color things dry and then also add water. Why do I do that? Because not everybody uses water in their Bible, but let's say you were to create an entry on this side of the page, kept it dry, you're using your Tombow markers, nothing's bleeding through, you're good to go. You flip over to the back page on another day and decide to do a watercolor entry. So you're going to watercolor to your heart's content, adding water, adding paint, keeping in mind no gesso, just naked page. That water is going to come through and activate whatever's on this page. If you use something like Tombow brush pens or sometimes distress inks, oxide inks that don't always bleed through when they're dry, but when you add water, they bleed. So if you added water to this side, that water is going to go through, it's going to activate what's on this, and you're going to have a ginormous mess. So I treat things as if they bleed with water. That's just kind of my default. So I will have photos of all of this over on my blog. Again, I didn't test everything, but what I did was I stamped and then I used a wet paintbrush to kind of swirl in the center of my image. That way I could see dry versus wet. So for the most part, there's quite a bit of things that you can use in here that you can't use in other Bibles. Archival ink, I typically stay away from archival ink, but you can get away with using archival ink in this Bible without it bleeding through. Just keep in mind, if it's a brand new ink pad straight from the store, it's extra juicy, it might bleed more than an ink pad that you've had for 5 years. Certain colors, reds, purples, blacks, those tend to bleed through more than lighter colors like light greens and things like that don't tend to bleed as much. So when we're talking about distress inks and distress oxide inks, when I stamped these and added water, they didn't really bleed too much. But I know from my experience, and if you've watched things on my channel, if I was to do the ink smushing technique where I put distress ink on a piece of plastic, spray it with water, flip that over and push it onto the page, that water activates the ink. It's a lot of ink, it's a lot of water. It will have a tendency to bleed through. So just keep that in mind. When you stamp it, sometimes it might not bleed, but when you start adding additional layers, you might have some bleed through. Same thing with stamping. If you stamp one time, it might not bleed through. But if I was to stamp archival ink, let's say I use a stamp positioning tool and stamp the same impression 2 or 3 times and built up that ink, I might start to have some bleed through. So just because I say it doesn't bleed does not mean that you can't get it to bleed, but this just kind of gives you a gloss over. So, you know, things that always bleed through, Jane Davenport mermaid markers, those bleed. Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, those bleed. Arteza, those bleed. Again, when you're using them dry, they might not really bleed. They shadow pretty heavy, but the second you add water, that pigment comes through. I have yet to find a brush marker that does not bleed through. Most brush markers are made with a dye-based ink. Typically, you want to avoid dye-based inks in your journaling Bibles because dye has a tendency to bleed. For Inktense and Neocolor 2 crayons, I like to use those wet. So I actually dipped my pencil into water, dipped my crayon into water, and then made my little swatch. And there's shadowing, but no real bleed through. Distress oxide sprays. I figured that those would bleed through. Yes, they bleed through. Heidi Swap Color Shine. These are not on the market anymore, but I know a lot of people have those. Those definitely bleed through. Distress paints. These are new to me. I'm really enjoying these quite a bit. They're a little bit different than regular acrylic paint. They're made to react with water like all of the rest of distress products, but they do dry permanent, which is really nice. So they're like a super fluid acrylic paint. Those don't have a tendency to bleed through for me, and I've added water and things like that, and I can use those just fine. So if you like the distress color palette, you like the water reactivity of distress products, but you don't like the bleed through, maybe try picking up a couple of the distress paints and try those. They are definitely more opaque than the inks, but it allows you to play with distress products and not worry about bleed through. Zebra midliners, these were new to me. I know Bethany is using these. They did not bleed through if I'm just writing with them or if I just highlight once, but if you go over several times in the same place, they will start to bleed through. But I think that's pretty consistent. That's just kind of the nature of this paper. This paper is definitely thicker. Like I said, it's 75% thicker than traditional Bible paper. And it's just made different than journaling Bible paper and Bible paper. It seems to be a little bit more fibrous and a little bit more, it absorbs a little bit more. So I find that if I really scrub at the page or add a lot of water, I can get things to start to seep through and the page to break down. A great example of that is this that I did in the green one here. Now, watercolor does not typically bleed through. Crayola watercolors do, but most other watercolors, you can safely use those and not worry about bleed through. And so what I did on here was I actually sprayed the page down with water, used a couple different colors of teal and mint to kind of create an ombre effect. And I was really trying to get these to blend. I wanted a seamless blend. So I was going back and forth and adding water and adding paint. Because of the nature of this paper, it kind of grabs onto pigment and holds on to it. So you can't ever really get a seamless blend. You're going to see there's a line there. And so that's one thing I found with watercolors. But also, the more you work with it, the more it breaks down the paper and color starts to come through. So just keep that in mind. You can watercolor in these Bibles. You just need to be light-handed. Don't overwork it, don't scrub it, and don't use an excessive amount of water. So you just need to kind of play around. It's going to be different painting in here than it is painting in another Bible, and definitely different than painting on watercolor paper. It's just not really made to perform that way, but it can be done, and I'll show that to you. Okay, so the front, you've got a nameplate area. You've got your list of the books of the Bible. We go into Old Testament, and then right into Genesis. So everything else is pretty much consistent and the same as you go through the Bible. So let me show you some different entries and some of the things that I did. So this is kind of a traditional entry for me. This is how I like to work, a little mixed media in the background and then some paper elements on top. This is Prima watercolor and Daniel Smith watercolor. Everything in here is naked page, no prepping. I do not like to page prep. If you do, you can definitely try, a clear gesso or watercolor ground. I do have some videos and information about that. I hate taking the time to use this, so I don't. And I wanted to show you how these pages perform without that. So keep that in mind. There's no page prep. These are naked pages. So I sprayed the page with just clean, clear water and then dropped in my watercolor. I did do some blending. I did add multiple layers, dried it, and I didn't have any bleed through. So I was just careful not to scrub it too much. This here that's shadowing, I mean, that is like super, super, super dark black and green paint mixed together. There is some shadowing, but no bleed through. These pages do wrinkle, probably, I would say, a little bit more than regular journaling Bible paper, but it smooths out. All paper, when it gets wet, it wrinkles. But once the Bible's been closed, it smooths out. No problem. You can iron your pages if the wrinkles bother you. You just want to lay a piece of like copy paper over your entry. I wouldn't iron over the top of paper in plastic and things like that. I would iron just over watercolor. But lay a piece of copy paper and then use an iron on a low temp. Don't stay in one place too long and just kind of go over it, and it will smooth things out if the wrinkle bothers you. I like the texture. I don't worry about it. One thing you'll know as notice as I'm flipping through, it's a lot easier to flip these pages. And so there is a little bit of a difference between these. The new ones have kind of an oblong shape to the holes that the coil is in. You'll see all the other versions, it's a perfect round circle hole. So these ones are a little bit more oblong, and which I appreciate that they made that change. That wasn't even a change that I would have known would have made a difference, but it does make it so the pages kind of slide through a little bit easier. You will notice that I do kind of take chunks and just help the pages along as I go through. And that just ensures that I don't have anything tear. I've been working in these Bibles for a couple years now, and I'm pretty hard on my Bibles. They go to workshops with me. I toss them around my office. My kids flip through them. I have yet to have a page tear and fall out. I know that that's a concern that some people have. I've never had that happen to me, but I'm not flipping to Revelation all at once. I kind of go through in chunks, and that kind of helps preserve those holes. So this page here, I created using some distress paints. Now again, because these are meant to work with water, I wanted to test that out and see, when I add water, do they bleed? So I used some purples, some pinks, some of the colors that, typically I might have some bleed through if I was adding water to a medium like that. So I used a water brush. This is a paint brush that has water in the barrel. Just picked up a little of the paint and then basically watercolored with acrylic paint, I think is the best way to explain that. Again, naked page, no page prep, and no bleed through. And because I was using the water brush and very little water, I didn't even really have any wrinkling. Those paints are very, very smooth, so you can't even hardly, feel that there's anything on the page. For the lettering, I used a Tombow calligraphy pen. I don't have a problem with these bleeding through. You can see I was pretty heavy-handed, and no bleed through was not an issue. So they definitely can stand up to quite a bit of abuse. So there's that entry there. And then today I really wanted to test myself to do watercolor, because one of my consistent issues with this particular paper in these Bibles is the watercolor. It is a little bit more difficult to watercolor on these pages than other journaling Bibles and traditional Bibles. And so what I did for this page, again, naked, not prepped, I sprayed it a little bit with water just to kind of moisten the page a little bit because I did want it to be a soft, loose look. And then I just went in with some Prima and Daniel Smith watercolors and just very loosely painted. I tried not to think about it. I tried not to scrub or overcorrect things. I tried to just let it be, let it happen, let it be loose. And I had much more success this way. If I'm trying to be very precise with my blending and I want it to look very clean, I struggle with that on this paper just because it kind of holds on to the pigment. But you can see I was able to get, some color to bleed together. I did not dry in between layers. I just kept everything wet while I worked. While the paint was wet, I went in with an Inktense pencil and just kind of added some little squiggly marks. And because the paper was wet, it activates the ink in these pencils. And so I had some dry areas, some wet areas, and then I dried it, went over with some ink pen, just a regular like micron pen to add some more details. And then for the lettering, I used some Amsterdam acrylic ink. I don't have a problem with these bleeding through usually, but I went in full, like I did not water this down. I just stuck my brush directly into this and then just did some brush lettering. Again, this is naked, no gesso, and I had no bleed through. I was very happy with how it came out. So very little wrinkling. Like I said, I just did this today and I did not iron it. So it's really not that wrinkly, just that little bit of time being closed in the Bible seems to smooth things out. And one thing you'll notice different if you are familiar with watercolors, if you're watercoloring on watercolor paper, if you oops or make a mistake, you can kind of reactivate that paint and pick up or lift the color from the page and almost go back to pure white watercolor paper. You can't do that on these pages. They hold on to the pigment. So you can lighten the color a little bit, but if you make an oops, you can't really erase it by lifting the pigment. It will stay stained to the page. And the more that you try to correct that, the more that you go over it, the more it starts to kind of disintegrate the paper and you'll have issues. So just keep that in mind. If you're somebody who your go-to medium is watercolors, it doesn't mean that you can't work in these. It's just going to be a little bit different of an experience. It will just feel a little bit different watercoloring on here than it does in some of the other Bibles that you may have worked on. But as you can see, I was able to get really soft, beautiful colors blended together, very loose, get a little bit of shading in some areas, just have fun, let loose, and I was able to, get it done. So there is a look at the new NIV Illustrating Bible. Again, you can check out Bethany to see the pink one. She might have some additional information, some different things that she may have noticed about them. So check out her unboxing as well. Again, these are available for pre-order, so I will link those links down below. Those are affiliate links. So thank you to DaySpring for sending this to me for review. I so appreciate being able to get my hands on these early so I can give you guys information so you can shop with confidence and decide what you want. Like I said, these the green one is still available in the shop. So if you prefer the CSB translation, you can still get this one. But these are in the NIV translation, so you do have some options. Check out those links down below. Check out the blog post for the close-up photos if you want to see. I'll have everything indicated, what bled, what didn't bleed, and all that will be over there, and measurements and close-up photos and all that goodness will be there for you guys. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.